This happened in July of 2017. I was new to a big city and decided that I didn't need my car anymore, so I listed my car for sale, a 6-year-old Honda Accord. A normal, well-dressed man comes over to see it after a few phone calls about it. He's in his early 40s and his name is James. He's buying it for his daughter in college. I always have my guard up when dealing with strangers, but so far James is personable and seems legitimate. He test drives the car with me in it. He does a thorough inspection. He negotiates the price with me for a while, and he asks me to hold the car for 2 days so he can get the money to come pick it up. I agree. A 2-day hold where I won't sell it to someone else. 2 days later, James follows up and we meet again. Midday, a normal neighborhood in an urban city. James and I test drive the car one more time. He gives me a Chase Bank cashier's check, which I said was fine. I tell him he needs to come to the bank with me to cash his check and to get the title notarized over to him. This is when he starts acting nervous. We're pulled over on the side of the street discussing this, while James in the driver's seat and me as the passenger. I figured if he was going to steal my car, he would have done so 2 days earlier, and so now I'm fairly comfortable with him. He asks me to do one more car inspection with him, then we'd go out to the bank. I agree, but I'm very set on doing the transaction at a bank. As we both get out to inspect the car again, he jumps back in and floors it as I try to get in back with him. He pulls away quicker than I can react, with the passenger door wide open. I try to run after him, and then realize that I'm not as fast as a car. There are bystanders and I hysterically ask someone to call 911. One guy does. I had my phone but my adrenaline was through the roof and didn't even think of it. As I'm on a stranger's phone with dispatch, an undercover cop car with 2 officers pulls out of an alley 5 feet from me. I wave them down and hysterically explain my story. They tell me to hop in the back of their car, which I do. I implore them to hurry and we can catch this guy. He just drove off. I explain the car and the plate and everything, and they assure me that they will not go on a high-speed chase with me in the car, but will radio it in to all surrounding officers, which they do. The guy gets away and the officers drop me off at the police station to file a report. I file an insurance claim too, and am so mad at myself for letting this happen. I suppose it's better than if I was in the car with this guy, but I'm still mad. Of course, James's burner cell phone doesn't work as soon as he had left. I go through insurance and their protocols to ensure I'm not committing fraud for about 3 months. The week I'm supposed to get paid, I get a call from the police. They found my car, almost 3 states over. James was working with a partner in crime. Don't remember his name, let's call him Dickface. James stole the car and gave it to Dickface to sell, so it wasn't traceable back to James, and Dickface would have plausible deniability if he was ever questioned. Well, Dickface sold my car to an average Joe who actually did have a daughter in college who needed a car. The daughter tried to register her new car at the DMV and it came up as stolen, so the cops arranged for me, the average Joe, and Dickface, whose contact info average Joe had, as he paid him with a check, and there was a paper trail, to meet with them at the station for a little chat. Dickface denies any involvement with James, but agrees to give us the money back that average Joe paid him if he can just leave without any problems. We all agree to this. Average Joe and I say that his daughter can keep the car, and I'll take the money from Dickface. So eventually I got paid for my car, but this experience sucked balls and was very stressful. Since then, I have bought and sold cars on Craigslist again, so no lesson was learned, except now that I take a photo of the driver's license of all the people I interact with at the start. Here's a story from my Craigslist adventures that still boggles my mind. It wasn't your typical horror story, but definitely one for the books. I had this 70s Buick sitting in my driveway, a real classic, a bit of an oil leaker. It was time for it to find a new home, so I listed it for $1,500 on Craigslist, hoping it would catch the eye of a fellow classic car enthusiast. Calls came in, but no one seemed serious about taking it off my hands, until this one kid, maybe around 21, showed a genuine interest. We agreed to meet up at a local parking lot around 7 PM for him to check out the car. I arrived at the parking lot about 10 minutes early, eager to get the sale over with. The Buick, despite its age and the oil leak, was a car I hoped would find a good home. The clock ticked past 7 p.m. and there was no sign of the kid. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe traffic, maybe he got lost. But by 7:30 with no word and my calls going unanswered, I decided to call it a night. Disappointed, I drove back home. The Buick's engine grumbled as if it knew it wasn't going to be sold that night. Then out of nowhere, at around 9:45 p.m., my phone rang. It was the kid, apologizing profusely for missing our meeting. He sounded sincere, regretful even, and asked if we could meet again, right then back at the parking lot. Part of me wanted to say no, just forget the whole thing. But another part, the part that just wanted to clear my driveway of the Buick, agreed. So I found myself heading back to the parking lot, hopeful but cautious. I got to the parking lot at exactly 10 p.m., and once again the kid was nowhere to be seen. I started to feel like a fool, standing there under the dim parking lot lights. Just as I was about to leave, at around 10:15, a Caprice Classic rolled in, the kind of car you can hear before you can see, thanks to its giant rims. The driver pulled up near me, and out stepped the kid, along with two skanky girls from the back seat, who looked like they were trying too hard to look older than they probably were. The kid, full of energy, made a beeline for the Buick, while the driver and the girls just sort of lingered around, making small talk. The kid inspected the Buick like a pro, or at least, he tried to give off that impression. He checked under the hood, started it up, and even took it for a quick spin around the parking lot. I was left making awkward conversation with the girls and the driver. The atmosphere changed with an odd mix of anticipation and discomfort. The kid soon returned from his test drive with a look of pure joy on his face. "I really want this, man. This is awesome," he exclaimed, his enthusiasm for the Buick apparent. It was then that we got down to talking about the price. I reiterated my asking price of $1,500, but mentioned I was open to negotiation, expecting maybe he'd offer a bit less in cash. What he proposed next, however, threw me in for a loop. I was only able to scrape together $1,300, he started, which was fine by me, but then he added, "But I've got a good deal for you. Give it to me for $1,250, and you can fuck her," pointing to the skanky brunette. Then he continued, "Or let's do this for $1,000, and you can have them both." My jaw nearly hit the floor. Was he serious? I turn and look at the girls. My guess is that they're 16 and look like they'd do it right here in the parking lot. "Yeah, no, I'll just take the $1,300 and you can get the car," I managed to respond, trying to mask my shock and disapproval. The kid then said, "What? You don't think they'd be good? Fuck man, that pussy is tight enough to rip your dick off." $1,250 and you can have the blonde, he pushed back, insisting on the value of his offer. But I stood my ground, firmly declining. The conversation took a turn for the bizarre as he tried to negotiate further, but I was done. I wanted to conclude the sale and distance myself from this unsettling encounter. In the end, the kid handed me over $1,300 in cash, with an odd amount of $155 in $1 bills. Despite his earlier propositions, I made it clear I wasn't interested in anything beyond selling the car. He seemed to accept this reluctantly, offering me a 2-day window to change my mind, which I had no intention of using. Driving home, I couldn't help but reflect on the bizarre and discomforting experience. The sale of the Buick was meant to be a simple Craigslist transaction, and this had veered into territory I had not expected, highlighting the unpredictable and sometimes disturbing nature of dealing with strangers online. I never contacted the kid again, and this encounter left me with a story that, while not horror in the traditional sense, was unsettling in its own right. My Buick was gone, but the memory of that night lingered, a reminder of the strange, sometimes dark paths our interactions can take us down, especially when we step into the anonymous world of online sales. Back when my wife and I were sorting through our childhood home, preparing to sell it, we stumbled upon a dilemma that felt more sentimental than practical. Nestled in the backyard was her childhood treehouse. This wasn't some haphazard pile of boards. It was actually a miniature fortress, complete with a shingled roof and sturdy walls, a testament to countless childhood adventures. As much as it pained us, we knew it had to go make room for the new owner's plans. But rather than take down such a significant piece of our past, we thought, why not give it a new life? And so I turned to Craigslist, hoping to find it a new home where it could be cherished once more. The ad was simple. We Treehouse, well-loved, seeking new adventures, must dismantle and transport. I included pictures emphasizing its good condition and the care with which it had been built, imagining it would be a perfect find for another family. Not long after posting the ad, I got a hit. A guy, let's call him Mark, was very interested. He bombarded me with questions about the treehouse, its size, the materials used, how sturdy it was. I answered as best as I could, emphasizing that while it was in great shape, moving it would be no small feat. It needed to be dismantled carefully, and a sizable truck would be necessary for transportation. Mark seemed undeterred and even excited. He mentioned that he was even planning to transport it all the way down to Washington. Now, this raised a red flag for me because we're in Vancouver. I remember thinking that it was ambitious, but the logistics alone, considering its size and the potential hassle of the border, seemed like a nightmare. But I figured this was his problem to solve and not mine. We went back and forth over details for about 3 weeks. Mark was full of assurances that he was up for the task, but he missed several appointments to come and see the treehouse in person. Each time he had a new excuse. Work, car troubles, you name it. It was frustrating, but part of me admired his persistence. Finally, he showed up. He examined the treehouse with an enthusiast's eye, nodding approvingly at the craftsmanship. "It's perfect," he declared. "I'll make arrangements and get back to you. Maybe I'll rent a Home Depot truck or something." Then just like that he was gone, leaving me to wonder if he'd actually return to follow through. This initial encounter set the stage for what I thought would be a straightforward transaction. However, little did I know, this was the beginning of an ordeal that would leave me questioning the sanity of dealing with strangers on the internet. After Mark's visit, another stretch of silence followed. No calls, no texts, nothing. I started to think that maybe he'd bitten off more than he could chew, and decided against taking the treehouse. Honestly, I was halfway to calling a professional to dismantle it and be done with the whole thing. But then, out of the blue, my in-laws called me in a panic one afternoon, their voices tight with stress. "They've destroyed our yard," was the first thing I heard when I picked up the phone. Confused and worried, I rushed over to their place, not sure what I'd find. The scene that greeted me was beyond anything I'd expected. The backyard fence was knocked flat, sawed-off branches were scattered everywhere, making it look like a storm had passed through. But the treehouse, the cause of all this chaos, stood oddly untouched, except for one glaring detail. A single glass window was missing. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Who would do something like this? Then it hit me. Could Mark be behind this? It seemed far-fetched, but the timing was too coincidental. I immediately reached out to him, half expecting not to hear back. To my surprise, he answered immediately, as if he were waiting for my call. "Oh yeah, I came by today," he said, almost casually. "Thought I'd start on the treehouse." His voice and tone was nonchalant, as if knocking down fences and leaving a mess in his wake was everyday behavior. I was floored. He admitted to driving over with no prior arrangement, taking down part of the fence to get his truck closer, and then deciding the job was too much for him after he removed the window. The audacity of his actions was staggering. He seemed genuinely perplexed by my anger, suggesting that he'd been doing us a favor by attempting to remove the treehouse. A valiant attempt in his words. The conversation went in circles, with Mark failing to grasp the extent of his intrusion and the damage he'd caused. The aftermath of the call with Mark left me seething and baffled. How could anyone think that their actions were remotely acceptable? But there was no time to dwell on this baffling lack of awareness. The immediate problem was the state of my in-laws' backyard, looking more like a crime scene than a piece of residential property, and so I had to act fast. I contacted the police, not sure if they could do anything about it but desperate for some form of recourse. They were sympathetic but explained that since Mark hadn't technically stolen anything apart from the window, which he seemed to think was a fair trade for his efforts. There wasn't anything they could do beyond filing a report. Frustrated but undeterred, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I spent the next several days cleaning up the mess, sawing off the damaged parts of the treehouse and dismantling what remained. It was heartbreaking work, destroying what had once been a symbol of childhood innocence and adventure. But with every swing of the hammer, I felt a bit more of my frustration ebb away, replaced by determination to move past this bizarre episode. The treehouse and the remnants of the face were eventually cleared away, and we decided to use the space for a new project. A laneway house that had been the dream of my father-in-law's for years. The transformation of the backyard from a disaster zone to a construction site, and eventually to a beautiful functional space, felt symbolic of the whole ordeal. In the end, Mark never contacted us again. Whether he lost interest or finally understood the extent of his overstep, I'll never know. And while the backyard looks nothing like it used to, the story of the treehouse takedown has become something of a legend in our family. It's a reminder of the chaos that can ensue from a simple Craigslist ad, and the unexpected ways in which we're forced to say goodbye to pieces of our past. But more than that, it's taught me a lesson, and a valuable lesson, about the unpredictability of dealing with strangers online. I learned that no matter how straightforward something may seem, there's always a chance for the unexpected. And sometimes you just have to roll with the punches, clean up the mess, and build something new from the wreckage.